Hi, my name is Denis Clohessy. I'm a composer for film and theatre, and I also do sound design for theatre as well.
Hi Dennis, thanks very, very much for taking part in this. I can see kind of the little bits of arrays of instruments sitting behind you. Yeah. What's
Yeah,
that small? What's the small? Is it
this
man?
guy,
Yeah.
that's a charango.
Okay.
That's a it's a Bolivian lute.
Oh wow.
It was used in the film Babel by the composer Gustavo Santaola. He plays that's one of his instruments he plays.
Okay.
When I heard the score, I was going, I have to find out what the instrument is, and I bought one.
Cool. And can you play it?
Not right now. It's
No,
probably a
no, no,
tune.
no. No, it's not that type of gig.
It's actually tuned like a mandolin, so or sorry, no, like a ukulele. So if you can play the ukulele, you can have a good bash at the charango.
Okay. Can you tell me when you were a young person, kind of growing up, was music completely in your life? Was that kind of what was it about for you from an early age?
I mean, I was always well, like I actually come from quite a theatrical family. So my parents met in an amateur drama group called Strand Players.
Oh yeah.
They had various aunts and uncles as well. Actually, they all kind of met together in that thing. So and they used to go down to Athlone a lot to do the All Ireland thing down there, the ESO Championship, I think it was called. I can't remember what it was called. But we used to be dragged down. I have a twin brother as well, so we used to be dragged down, and we'd be like running around the auditoriums, kind of raising hell and getting in the way and looking through the curtains and pushing buttons and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of had. I think I was. Before music, I was kind of drawn to the theatrical side of things first, but the music came actually from listening to Metallica and Slayer and that kind of stuff. And I bought a guitar and I was like, yeah, I'm into this kind of thing. So that's that. It was from playing guitar first that I got into the music.
And was kind of back in the kind of theatrical space, was kind of acting ever in your head or something like that that you wanted to do? Was that?
Well, I did do drama lessons with Anne Kavanagh from the age of 4, with myself and my brother.
Yeah.
And apparently we were terrible divils. We used to. She made us wear different color shoes so that she could tell us apart. And then one day we came in and I had a red shoe on and a blue shoe on, and so did John. So we both basically were trying to trick her. So essentially we've been trying to play tricks on people since we were young.
Okay. um, and in relation to that, like, was when have visions of Dennis with Metallica and kind of Slayer. What age was that about? Kind of.
I would have been a teenager,
Yeah.
15, 16. I had the long hair, everything. Total rock.
And was there kind of was there a time when it kind of became something more serious for you? Like, what did you go on to study after school? Was it kind of?
Yeah, I did. Well, I mean, the more I got into the guitar, I was doing lessons with Mike Nielsen, who's a jazz guitarist. But so he was kind of teaching me some classical stuff as well. So the class, and now also my dad, I must say, like he's done a lot of cultural stuff. He's been involved in a lot of cultural events and bodies, institutions. So he was the chair of the National Concert Hall as well. So there's always music in the house of a kind of contemporary classical kind of nature. He was also involved in the theatre festival as well and the Gate, but I don't know if you want to talk about all that stuff. But there was always that music. I went to Mike Nielsen. I was doing the guitar lessons, and I was getting, I did have a love of classical music as well. So I didn't do music in school, but I wanted to go on and do music. I knew I was enjoying music, and I wanted to do more about it the older I got. So I did a lot of grinds in music before doing an interview for Maynooth, and that's where I went on and studied music. And I did composition and history of music in Maynooth. So they were the two subjects I took there.
And had you kind of, I mean, as you said, coming from that kind of background and that kind of, you're obviously very aware of kind of the cultural kind of life of Dublin and Ireland, and it was in your house, it was a natural thing. But did you? I suppose I'm interested in that transition from Metallica, Slayer to that kind of classical contemporary. I mean, obviously there is a huge technique to that metal music, but like it's a different side of the brain, I suppose, in some ways. For the other kind of more contemporary classical, how did that kind of start happening for you?
Well, I mean, I'd still listen to Metallica, and
Yeah.
I'd still, I like anything with energy and drive and just something that's a little off kilter, I think. And I think there's something about the way composition has to be a kind of something that you can, it sounds familiar, but it has to be new at the same time. And I think that kind of music is the most appealing to people.
Okay.
So a lot of stuff, a lot of pop music and stuff can be very just familiar without having the edge. And I personally like music with a little bit of an edge in it as well. So that's, I think, why I was drawn to that in the first place.
Okay.
So then I listened to, for example, the Shostakovich 7th Symphony, which I'm actually working on right now. I'm just transcribing it into my computer setup just for kicks. And that's kind of heavy metal in my book as well. You know, there's drama in that. There's kind of like big loud forces in that. So there's drama in it as well. I think that's a lot to do with the heavy metal stuff. There's a lot of drama in it, you know.
Yeah, and were you? So I suppose when then you went in, was that a big kind of jump for you then to head into college to study it after kind of doing it off your own bat or through kind of grinds or through, you know, not necessarily through the school system? How did that kind of feel for you? Was that okay?
Yeah, it was. Like, I mean, the first year in college was fine. It was like I had done all the, you know, the counterpoint and the harmony and the melody, so I had the basics, you know. But again, I got involved in college life a lot, so I tended to put the academic side to one side.
Yeah.
But you know, I think I still got most of my work done in there. I definitely veered towards composition then as well. So I was kind of leaving behind the theoretical stuff and getting more involved in the composition, and also the music students in Maynooth would play your pieces. So I was studying with John Buckley and Martin O'Leary.
Okay.
So we'd organise groups to play, you know. So hearing your music as well was really addictive, and it was like, this is something I like, you know. So it was definitely a shot to the veins that I was like, I want more of this.
And was the band around that time as well? Like, was that kind of later, Prayer Boat, or was that kind of?
The Prayer Boat would have been after, like, that was 98 when I was working with them. Yeah. No, so I finished in college in I finished in Maynooth in 95, and then I did a year in UCD doing arts administration. Because, I mean, realistically, leaving college, you're not going to get a job in music. That's just like pipe dream kind of stuff, you know. But I left college, and then a friend of mine, Jim Roach, who's just been in Normal People actually, he started a theatre company with another friend of ours, Shane Crossan, called Theatre of the Unimpressed, and we did a show in Dublin Castle in the Crypt. We did Glass Menagerie, and that was the first show I'd ever done, but it got nominated for an Irish Times Theatre Award at the time. So I was like, oh, brilliant. This is how it's going to be for the rest of my career, my glittering career in theatre. But it wasn't.
It's gas though, because kind of that, as I was around the same area that I was kind of leaving college myself, and the sense there was a kind of like places like the Crypt, City Arts Centre, you know, loads more places, and the Fringe kind of starting. There was an energy, a kind of a punky energy in a way around Irish theatre at that time, and around music, particularly with, you know, kind of second wave of Irish bands coming through after U2 or after, you know, I mean, there was kind of a second wave kind of happening then. Were you kind of, I suppose, like, did you write a lot? Like, it's kind of writing something that you do, whether you're commissioned to do work or working on something, like when you're saying you're working there on symphony, like, is that something you kind of have an urge to do the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, like, currently I'm looking at a huge amount of orchestration clips on YouTube, and then lots of stuff about mixing and production, all that kind of stuff. But like, after college, when I left that, I did another course in film scoring with Screen Training Ireland. And so I've been writing essentially since 1990, really. I've been composing since 1990. And even when I haven't been commissioned or asked to do something, I've been writing, you know. So of the last 15, 20 years that I've been doing this, I haven't really done my own stuff. I've been kind of commissioned, and I've been very busy, thankfully. So I haven't had a huge amount of time to do any of my own stuff. But I'm doing a few little bits and pieces here now as well, while I'm looking at all the clips and the videos and cleaning the house and doing the garden and practicing piano downstairs.
For those, actually, I say this in most of these videos, for those to find this somewhere in 20 years' time in the YouTube, what the hell are they talking about? It's 21st of May and we're confined due to a global pandemic, just in case people are going, why is everyone stuck in their houses?
Yeah.
Who are these people? But in relation to sort of the film side, because obviously you have had, you know, a great career in theatre and kind of film. Was there a sense, like, go back to the Glass Menagerie for me, like that? How did that feel doing your first show? Like, what kind of attracted you to kind of, you know, scoring or compose? What is it about that kind of went, oh?
Well, it was the audience as well. You know, there's an audience there, so that's you see people's reactions on their faces to what's happening. Now, not that they're necessarily reacting to the music, but you know, the whole atmosphere, the ambience, all that kind of thing. But I remember, like, I composed it on a keyboard I had before sequencers were really a thing. So sequencers, what people will nowadays write their compose their music on if they're using computers. And they weren't really a thing, but there was this built-in, very basic sequencer. So I'd recorded it on that. And then I was trying to figure it out how to get it into the sound system, because I do some sound design as well, but it's not something that I've trained in. This is something I've picked up along the way, you know. So at the time, back in '98, I was like, how do I get so I actually ended up bringing the keyboard in and pressing play on the keyboard, because I couldn't figure out how to get it onto a mini disc or whatever it was at the time. So I had this big keyboard in there, and I remember I was doing some of the lights as well, but I kept screwing them up, so they got someone else to do it. And then, like the houses were great. There was a great word of mouth. We got nominated for the award. Our Fiona, the actress, actually got nominated. And I was literally thinking, this is brilliant. But then it was another couple of years before I did my next show, which would have been with Liam Halligan. Because I was doing the Screen Training Ireland film course, and Laura Forrest Hay, who used to play with the Big Geraniums, was doing the course as well. Yeah, and she does a lot of theatre work, and she'd done some work with Liam Halligan, but he'd asked her to do something, but she wasn't available, so she recommended me because I knew her through the course. So we did a show down in Mullingar called Cracked in 1999, I think it was, and I did a couple of iterations, but. There was like a cello player, violin player, and clarinet player in the cast, so it became a very big musical thing. And then I did a couple more gigs with Liam, but it was all very slow. I was also working at IMRO at the time, so I wasn't making money from theatre. This is just like a part-time gig, you know.
Yeah.
So
And then around that time, Prayer Boat, you kind of that you know, that was, you know, for those that were around at that time, Prayer Boat were a big deal in Ireland, you know, and that album particularly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lovely album. People should go and check it out again. But I did the string arrangements. I wasn't doing any of the composing. But I'm from a village called Manor-Kilbride in County Wicklow, and so are the Prayer Boat. And there's actually another chap called Darrell O'Toole who composed the music for Michael Inside, and he's from Manor-Kilbride as well. So it's a bit of and I mean, it's a small village. You know, it's one street with a shop and a petrol station and a church. So it's, you know, there was a lot of music down in that village. But
it's gas actually. So I'm from Bray originally, like back in, so Prayer Boat would have had residents because they were the Wicklow band, you know. Then it was kind of I didn't realize Darrell, because I know Darrell. I didn't realize he was from down there as well. Sorry, go on. You were saying about Prayer Boat.
Yeah, so it was basically, so I know the lads, and they were making this second album, and I was talking to Tim, the drummer, in the pub one night, and I was just telling him about the film scoring course, and we're using strings and stuff. Like, we're going to use strings on our album, so would you like to come in and do the arrangements? And I was like, brilliant. So we went in, and I split a session, and we had an hour and a half to get through the strings on that, and I was completely nervous, and I was trying to conduct, and I wasn't even looking at them, and I was just going, and I think they just ignored me and did their thing. I was just standing there waving inanely at them. But it sounded, I mean, I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's just because the string players are so good. Yeah. And then, so we did a bit of touring after that. So I was playing keyboard with them, and we were in Spain and Holland, and doing lots of stuff in Whelan's, did some stuff in the Fla in London, and, and again, I'm still working in IMRO, so this is all part-time, but it was like, this is how I'm going to spend my holidays, is touring with the band, pretending to be cool.
Did you enjoy that, playing live aspect of this?
I did. I mean, I'm not a great, I do get quite nervous about performing in front of people. So I have played some theatre stuff live, but it's I think I'm not in a habit of doing that. So I think, it does make me apprehensive to think about doing that. But I did do another show with Liam Halligan in 2003 called Rashomon. and I learned lots of Japanese instruments to play there. So I mean, got away with it that time.
Yeah. I did an interview last night with as part of Dublin Youth Theatres, Ask the Pros, where they kind of get people from the industry in, and I've done a bit of a small bit of sound design and stuff myself in the past. And one of the questions asked by one of the young people was, how do you start a career, get into sound design, and even what is sound design and sound composition? And I said to her, well, look, you know, I'm talking to the right man tomorrow afternoon. So I suppose, I mean, interesting, you started, you know, with friends coming out of Maynooth, but like how does one develop that type of career, especially back in those days when the role wasn't, you know, as I suppose central as it is now?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was through composition. So I mean, I was composing, and then I think it actually was Fando and Lists, which I did with Selena Cartmel in 2003 as well. And we needed an explosion, or we needed something like that. And she was like, you can do that, can't you? And I was like, I'll see. So I went off and found some sound libraries, but you had to pay for them. So I didn't pay for them, and I just got these really bad versions of explosions, and we threw that in. No one seemed to notice, because it wasn't, as you say, it wasn't really a thing back then. It wasn't a big thing anyway. And particularly for kind of, I guess, younger theatre, like maybe, you know, expectations weren't there. But certainly I remember, like when I listen back to it now, I'm going, how the hell did we get away with that, you know? But yeah, so it was through composition and I think music production that I started learning about how to create and sculpt sound and do that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I always think that I approach any of the sound design kind of like a composition anyway. That's my kind of angle on it, you know? That's how I kind of, like, I'm sure, you know, really in sound design, like, so at the moment, it's kind of, sound design covers lots of stuff in theatre. Like, it covers composition, it covers sound design, and it covers engineering as well.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like saying in theatre that visuals cover costume, set, and lighting, you know? So there's people that are expert in costume, there's people that are experts in set, there's people that are experts in lighting. And it's the same with us. Like, so there are really good engineers, there's really good composers, and there's really good sound designers. But because, I don't know, for whatever reason, we are expected to do everything. You know what I mean? Now, it's not a bad thing, and we can make sure that things are kind of cohesive because they all work together. But it is an expectation, I think, that people just go, you can do everything perfectly. So you do have to learn stuff on the job a lot of the time and go, yeah, I can do it perfectly.
Yeah. And
cool.
Also at that time, I said, coming out of the screen course, and you started to work, I mean, not necessarily immediately, but you've kind of spanned the kind of the medias between kind of the filmic media and the stage media, and I presume they're very different approaches. Dennis, are they?
Yeah, I mean, I think with theatre, you're obviously very present. You're in the room with the people. It's all happening. So everything in the environment, if you hear someone behind you, that's part of the show in a way. You know what I mean? So everything you do in terms of a composition or a sound design has to feel like it's not distracting from the story. It needs to feel that it's bigging it up, it's bringing it up. Whereas with the film, you're watching it on a screen and you're accepting everything from that screen. So it's a different psychological experience, I think, that, you know, theatre, you actually have to be a lot more subtle in a way, even though sometimes I'm not subtle, but, you know, generally speaking, there has to be a bit more subtlety about the stage work.
Yeah. And do you find that, I suppose as well, you know, you go back to what you said about the Metallica and the energy and kind of that sense of, is that something that you look for? I mean, I'm kind of, before we get into kind of specific shows and people that you've kind of worked with, is that something that you kind of, that you respond to at a visceral level when you begin? I mean, I'm interested how you start, or does it depend on different projects?
Yeah, I mean, it does depend on each project, but it's like, you know, there was, I'm also a member of Screen Composers Guild, and we just did a Zoom meeting with John Powell, who's the composer who did The Bourne Legacy and How to Train Your Dragon, various things. And he talks about being a prostitute, a musical prostitute, you know, and he says the way to look at it is in every film, is what he said, every film there's something that draws you in, you know what I mean? There's something that you look for and you go, this really appeals to me. So I think every time someone asks about a production, you're going, immediately you're excited. The minute you get a call about a production, you get excited. And then you might do a read through or something, and you're going, okay, it's not quite what I was hoping for, or whatever it might be, but you kind of going, but there is this, and this is what I'm focused on, and this is where I know I can get something in. Yeah. So even if it may not be something that you thought it was going to be originally, you can still find something in there that kind of like draws you in and gets the juices going, gets inspired.
And you've worked, I mean, you know, over the past number of years, you've kind of not only have you got an extensive CV, but you've got in the best possible way, hugely eclectic one. You've kind of worked with companies of scale and small companies and theatre and education companies, and I think it's really great looking. I had a look, like, kind of was gas, kind of looking through your CV last night and kind of going, Jesus, you know, you've done loads, obviously. The actual spaces that you've worked in are as broad as the amount of shows that you've done. And is that something that you seek out, or is that something that just happens by chance to you?
Like I have no strategy in terms of career. I have to say I'm probably like most people working in theatre, but yeah, things happen. People ring. I should probably be a little more proactive about trying to get involved in things. But yeah, I mean, so I've done 2 West End shows, and what happens when you go to the West End is I acknowledge my limitations, and I go, we need to get a production sound person in here so that they can spec a proper system, because that's not my area of expertise, you know. So I'll do it in consultation with them. Same here in the Gaiety, for example. There's a D&B system. So Kevin McGing or someone would be someone I would talk to about sound setups over here. So for the bigger stuff, for the smaller stuff, then I can do that myself. But like, it's like anything. You know, the bigger the job is, you're probably going to grow a department. Do you know what I mean? So it's not. It's like even the John Powell talk we talked about. He has 4 or 5 people in his thing. He has orchestrators, he has fellow composers, he's the engineers, the mixers, all that kind of stuff. So the bigger the gig becomes, the more people you'll probably need to get involved to give you a hand, because it just becomes a substantial body of work then, you know.
And I can imagine that, you know, the key relationships to you, obviously the main one would be the director, I would imagine, and that sense of that sense of collaboration, because particularly in live theatre, like sound plays a huge part in it, but also in some ways, for a lot of the time, needs to be invisible, or or needs to be kind of invisible, but not so that it kind of just sits there. So I mean, that must be a very kind of live relationship with a director through that process.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it needs to do is tell the story with what's happening. So what the audience should be feeling is a story being told or unfolding. So whether that's through 2 actors looking at each other with music playing, they're still getting a story. They're not going, I'm hearing music, or they should, you know, what they should be getting is the story. So that can be done with text, or it can be done with work, could be done with movement. But what I'll tend to do is get into the rehearsal room with some of the cues, or early cues.
Yeah.
We'll run through some stuff in there, and actually, because tech times in Ireland are pretty short, the sooner I can get into the rehearsal room and start getting people used to what's going to be playing behind them, because, you know, there's nothing worse than going into tech and an actor hearing something for the first time going, okay, let me readjust everything I've had to, you know what I mean? So there is, you have to be, like, it's a team, as you know, it's a team job creating a piece of theatre. So, you know, a lead actor or a director may get all the kudos, but actually at the end of the day, it's everyone coming together. I mean, it's probably the stage manager that's probably the most important person in a production, as we all know. But, you know, really at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you're on the same page as everyone else, that the actors feel comfortable with what you're doing, the director feels comfortable, that you feel comfortable with it as well. You know, so everyone has to feel happy. And as Aileen Cosgrave once said, compromise is death, but I think she was joking. But we were doing a junk ensemble show, and we were all trying to agree together and saying, okay, that's a good compromise. And Aileen's like, compromise is death. But it was because we were doing something like edgy, and I think that's good as well. So there's an excitement in that too, you know.
Yeah. And in relation to that, like when you know, not necessarily talking about specifics, but what happens when you're midway or kind of at the beginning of something and it kind of pivots for you? Like, has that happened where you kind of go, oh, that's not it for you? You know,
Yeah.
what's that? What does that feel like?
It's like the sinking,
Yeah.
you know. But it's also, it's weird when you get into a space, the space will do something to what you produce as well. Now that happens less and less, I think, as I've gained experience and kind of like, and also I'll work in a lot of spaces that I know. So like I've done lots of stuff in Project and the Abbey and the Gate. So I know those spaces and I know what to expect when I bring in the material. But I think the thing is as well, I remember doing a show with an English director up in the Gate, and I had everything in the rehearsal room where it was, you know, we pretty much agreed on 90% of the cues. But when she heard there was an emptiness in the gate without the audience, obviously, that I think she got panicked by.
Yeah.
And she was like, we're going to need music, we're going to need music, we're going to. So during the tech, I was essentially composing during the tech, you know, and it was just like, it's not a good way to work. You need to, you just need to think about, you know, it can't be like, it needs to be kind of thought about, I think, you know.
Yeah.
But what I'll do a lot during techs is, because there is always rewrites, inevitably. And you know, obviously tech goes from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. or possibly later. So actually what I'll do is I'll tend to get up at around 4:30 during a tech, and I'll start doing my edits for about 2 or 3 hours before I head in, because that's when I'm at my most productive. So I'll get the good stuff done, then I'll go into the tech and I'll kind of like place it, but the actual creativity is done early in the morning for me.
Okay.
So
and in relation to your process, again, and I know this kind of changes to every production, but just a general, I mean, following on from that, like when you get offered or get brought into something, I mean, particularly say when it's not a devised process, when it's a kind of an extant script, that, you know, the writing process for you in that, is that something that you normally have composed before rehearsals start, or is it, you know, the actual themes, or does it kind of emerge?
It's most of the time it's after I hear a read through, because it's once you hear the actors, even though they're just cold reading, they haven't really put the thought yet into their characters and stuff like that. But just that sense of the physical embodiment of the actor reading the part, and actually seeing a set design or seeing costume design as well. Now I will obviously have had discussions and talks with the director before that, you know, there is the pre-production, but I probably am one of the later designers to be brought on. Like set would obviously be first, but in terms of what I do, I'm probably one of the later people to be brought on, unless it's like a music driven piece, you know, so that's obviously, we'll get going on that sooner rather than.
Before we kind of do a deep dive into theatre, I'm going to flip out into the film side of things, Dennis, and in relation to, you know, you've worked on narrative films, you've worked on kind of story films, but you've also kind of done like His and Hers, that documentary, and like what would be the process like on scoring that, or not scoring, designing that, composing for
that? Well, I mean that was kind of being edited in bits and pieces. So Ken would send me some of the stuff, and I'd try a little idea, and I remember like he sent me the first 10 or 15 minutes. And I just kind of composed for 10 or 15 minutes. But when he heard it, he went, do you see that phrase in there and that fragment in there? So he was kind of isolating sections in it. I said, I think this could be a good thematic piece here. So because I think Ken is all about parameters. So it needs to be simple, straightforward. It can't be too embellished. So we essentially went for 3 themes that actually runs through that film. And we just kind of felt this could, like, they didn't necessarily represent anything, but we felt this could be a moment for when we're talking about loss. So this one is about joy, you know. So they weren't strictly for that. They could represent a couple of different things, but just we limited it to 3. And so any development came from those 3.
Okay.
But it was being edited while I was composing. So a lot of the time for film, you'll wait for picture lock.
Yeah.
But in this case, no, we were kind of developing it as we went along, you know.
And the Barry McGuigan documentary as well. Was that similar, or was that picture lock kind of you went from, where you kind of?
That was, well, essentially that had a lot of temp music in it. So the temp music would have been like lots of stuff from the 80s. So that was picture locked, but like, you know, they had the various kind of synth pop bands and stuff that were in there. So and it was very evocative of the era. So essentially, what I did for that was like homages to that glorious decade of music.
Wow.
Well, I was listening to Metallica, you know.
Yeah, I was saying kind of going, you're trying to sneak in a bit of fucking, you know, heavy metal guitar in there.
Yeah. No, I got it in a couple of cues, but yeah.
And then the big work around the treaty, around the with Fastnet again, around the on treaty the 1921.
Yeah.
And that must have been really interesting from coming from a, you know, obviously from a historical context, but also from a music context as well. Like, how did that kind of evolve for you?
Well, there was three different. There was the siege, the treaty, and there was another one. I can't remember. There was a kind of a three-parter in that, and I mean that was kind of a more orchestral thing that we were going for in that, because I guess it's the kind of the history of Ireland and all that kind of idea. But there was always like something about it. So, for example, there was one moment where something was signed or something happened at Christmas. So we used Silent Night was one of the themes in there. You know what I mean? So it's just one of these kind of little evocative moments that you can take these things. I think that was at the end, kind of see what happens next kind of moment. And it was a kind of creepy Silent Night kind of idea, you know? But yeah, I mean, like if I'd worked on it the next day, something different would have come up. So it just happens to be because I was working in that time and space that happened, or you know.
But I think that's kind of interesting, and maybe not kind of spoken about a lot, particularly in film. Actually, I mean, even in theatre as well. That, you know, music composition, or particularly kind of maybe, yeah, music composition, it's a live art, you know, and then the sound design used from that, it's a live thing. And you said you might be in a different mood the next day, and different might have happened, and that I really I get a great buzz out of those choices, you know, that it goes those. But I think particularly in film, because once you make a choice, it's there. You kind of can't go back the next day and change it. Yeah. And then, just before we go back to theatre, kind of the Undressing My Mother, which again, that film went, you know, big, won awards. How did that come about for you? And again, what was the process like for you on it? Well,
again, it was Jim Roach, the pal of mine from college, who we started the theatre, we did Glass Menagerie with. He knew Ken. He'd done, I think, a short film with him, and Ken had mentioned to Jim that they were looking for a composer, and he said, "Oh, I have a buddy of mine who's just done stuff." So I did like maybe 6 or 7 shorts with Ken before we did His and Hers. So one of them was Undressing My Mother. He had some temp music in already. So I can't remember the people, like Chopin, some piano pieces basically. But so I did kind of, again, I was using the temp track as the inspiration for that, you know. But yeah, that went off and it won the European Film Awards, and also like it won an unlimited amount of awards. But I think that's what really kicked the career off for Ken as well then, you know.
So go back to theatre for me, and I have a question for you in relation. You mentioned back in college about the absolute buzz of hearing your music played back to you, and I kind of going to start nearly at the end, but kind of, you know, recently, and kind of go back. I mean, you know, with the last year, the year before, with Before and the orchestra, and that must have been an incredible journey. Well, obviously, with even a huge relationship with Pat and with Jim, and we kind of fish around that body of work, but that. Was that a massive buzz to get to do that?
Yeah. I mean, I've worked with the concert orchestra a couple of times. We did The Limits of Liberty was a TV series back in 2009. And then also, when I used to work in IMRO, we started the RTE film scoring program. So that was something that I'd started when I was working in IMRO, and that's still going to this day with the concert orchestra. So I've done a few bits and bobs with them, but so essentially with Before, I had Pat up here with me in this room, and we were like, so Pat would actually sing a melody to me, you know, and he'd be like, whatever, and I'd say, well, we can try it this way, or we can do it this, and then, you know, so it was very much a co-write. Pat's like going, oh, Denis composed the music, but actually it was the two of us together that were kind of creating the piece, and obviously Pat had all the lyrics done, all that kind of stuff, but then we had Cathal Sinnott come in as well, who conducted the concert orchestra, you know. And even working in theatre, a lot of actors will know Cathal from, you know, voice and all that kind of thing. But Cathal was a brilliant, reassuring guide, because, you know, myself and Pat were quite nervous about the orchestra and like going, we get this right, and we only have a certain amount of time, because, you know, between ourselves they gave us a very good rate, but we only had a certain limited amount of time to get it recorded, you know. But when we went in, I remember like I got caught in traffic on the way over, and I was like panicking. And I arrived like at 10 to 10. We started, the light goes red at 10, so like I was like coming in really breathless. It was like we were caught in traffic. It was bad, but Cahill was just like, yeah, cool as a cucumber, and he walks in to start, and he just looks at me, goes, I'm nervous too, you know, and he just walked in, and he was like, kicked it all off, and yeah, Pat was just so excited as well by it all. He was just like, you know, kept gripping everybody, going. It was fantastic. It was great.
And I suppose, you know, you've had, as you said, you've kind of worked in with a lot of theatres, but there are places you've had like more of an association with. For example, you did quite a lot of work with Rough Magic. You've obviously worked with Fishamble a lot, the Abbey and the Gate and Corn Exchange. But wasn't there a period with the Abbey where you were a resident artist at some point? Was that?
Yeah, I was an associate artist in 2008, but I had done Julius Caesar the year before. Jason Byrne directed that the year before, and then I was doing something down in Galway, and Fiach just said to me, "We'll get you in next year for a couple more gigs," and I was like, "Brilliant, great." And then actually next thing, Tom Creed texted me and said, "You're doing everything in the Abbey next year." I was like, no, Fiach said a couple of gigs. So he said, no, look online. So I went onto the Abbey website, and I was doing every show in the Abbey, in the Peacock and the main stage. So that was overwhelming.
Yeah. And what was your first experience of working in the Abbey? What was your first show in there?
Julius Caesar.
Oh, it was Julius Caesar. Okay. Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. That was a really great show.
Yeah. Declan Conlon was in that, and no, it was really good. I mean, it was really exciting to, like, I kept during the tech, I kept looking around going, this is the Abbey, you know. So it was very exciting. Yeah.
And then you go back to Tom Creed, because you've done a bit with Tom with Rough Magic, and then with Watt, and kind of, and I suppose there must be over the years a shorthand develops with kind of certain directors that you worked with, and that must make things slightly easier, or maybe in some ways more difficult if a kind of if a counterpoint arises between what divisions are.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think a lot of the time it's, you know, people do enjoy to work with the same person, so they'll get a relationship. But then, you know, it's nice to shop around sometimes as well. So you'll do the dance with someone else as well. Like, I've had a couple of run-ins, shall we say, but actually, you know, I think most of the time, most people are kind of understand the pressure that everyone's under. Like, you know, the show is opening, the tickets have been sold, we have to get the show up, it has to happen. You have to put egos to one side. So, like, maybe I've done probably nearly 200 shows, I've had maybe 3 or 4 good old Barneys, but I think like, that's pretty limited. I think a lot of the time people will bite their tongue with me, and I'll bite my tongue with them as well. But, you know, it's just how things have to work sometimes when you're under pressure.
I think as well, I mean, just go back for a second to yourself and Pat, because I think there is that, you know, I think there is, when you've worked with Fishamble in a broader context than that, but I suppose as a creator, you know, that the sound and the music is so much part of those shows that Pat and Jim and, you know, have developed. And was that, like, from Silent, you know, and was that kind of very much the way you kind of want to develop that work together, or did that kind of working relationship develop?
Because we had, I think it was something to do on Forgotten, that they needed to do a remix of the QLab file or something. I can't remember what it was, but there was something where Jim asked me to come in just to do a thing with Pat. So we went into the project for an afternoon or something and just ran the cues and remixed or rejigged or whatever we did. And then I suppose a couple of weeks later, months later, whatever it might have been, Pat was talking about Silent then. So we were like, let's start working on that. And again, like, Pat was up here a lot of the time. So we probably spent like 4 or 5 months. He'd come up maybe once a month. I'd play a few ideas and we'd talk through what's going on. So that's very rare to get that level of like, normally it's a 4-week deadline, you're in rehearsals, you get your thing done, and as you know, say maybe a little bit of pre-production. But this was like, Pat would hear, and then we kind of gently roll it out. So there was no like official opening. So it might be like a few friends in the lab would have a look. we'd cut chunks out of the play then, and then, you know, add some other bits and bobs in. Maybe another 2 months later, another group of friends, after a bit more work. So it was always being tweaked, and, you know, which was great, because like normally the show goes up, the previews start, and you're like, well, that's what we got, you know.
Yeah, I think as well, you know, your work straddles across, which is kind of unusual in a way. You say, as one of the kind of, you know, creatives, you work as well or as kind of comfortable in the highly contemporary, you know, aesthetic, or, you know, quasi dance, you know, or kind of, you know, companies like Broken Talkers and Junk Ensemble, as you would with maybe more classical work or more kind of text driven work. And in that, and sometimes in work that kind of sits in between those kind of genres, and kind of thinking particularly like your work with Selena Cartmel or kind of Junk Ensemble, and, you know, and Broken Talkers. I mean, Broken Talkers' most recent work, the most recent work that we've had out here, The Examination. Again, design was a huge part of that, but again, it was very evocative rather than being to the forefront. I mean, what's that process like for you, like working in that kind of genre?
Yeah, I mean, with the Examination particularly, like that was minimalism at its that was a pure example of minimalism, because it was, you know, as they say, tones and drones in a way, like, but it's about making those fit in a way that so it's not telling a story, it's setting a mood, I think, but it's also there's certain moments like where Willie might draw something out, and it needs to kind of just lift a little. So like, even though it sounds really simple, there's like might be about 12 stems running at the same time. So various things might come up and down as certain things happen. So it's like a kind of, there's a, you know, waves of things are happening depending on what's happening on stage. And then like there's a moment, like a true story about when he thought he was turning into a fly. And we recorded him just mimicking the sound of the fly. And then we just built that into a big, massive kind of in-your-face, like, turn it up kind of thing, Metallica style, you know.
There you go. And then sort of again in between space with Gary and Phelim, and then, you know, Megan and Jessica from Junk Ensemble on It Folds. Like, that was again that's supposed that evocation space. You know, that's kind of interesting. Those two things, the way they sit with composition, like and that is that kind of a space you like living in. You know, that the way they might kind of clash.
Yeah, but also, like, don't forget that there's very little text in those pieces as well. So there's room to play. So it's like, go for it. You know what I mean? And that's brilliant. You know, from my perspective, like, a lot of the time, and kind of, you do have to hold back, because you're part of the team, and I love that too, obviously. But like, when, you know, as part of the team, I'm just watching the Michael Jordan thing at the moment, but if you're allowed to go out front and be the Michael Jordan, it's like, great, give me the ball, and I'll have a run with this, you know.
You know me flicking through plays to see how much text there is in it.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I guess the Irish tradition is text, so you know, that's something I think that's like, I was part of the advanced course with Rough Magic, which is like the equivalent of Seeds. Seeds used to call us the Weeds, which is basically the older Seeds, you know. But we got to go to see a lot of stuff in Germany and Avignon and Poland, and it's a massive eye opener for how music and sound can be used theatrically for telling a story, and it isn't just filling something up. It's part of telling the story, not literally, but it's part of telling the story. So that was a great eye opener. I mean, it's I think Irish artists, the more widely travelled they can be, the more it's going to be a good influence for their work.
And particularly, I suppose, you know, glad you mentioned Rough Magic, because they have played a big part in kind of, you know, your career. But I mean, I think that sense of affording artists that opportunity to kind of, through those Seeds and Weeds program, to broaden their palette in a way is going to be of huge benefit back into the Irish theatre framework as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just say then, in relation to the kind of this scale and difference of work, like, must be a huge thing for you as well with your father's relationship with the Gate, to kind of get to work in there. I mean, was that kind of a moment?
Yeah, I mean, like, So he originally was one of the. He was a consultant in there when whoever, I think, I can't remember her name, but she was McLean Moore's personal assistant, and she'd taken over from once he died. So there was like 10% box office, 15% box office. So he came in as a consultant to try and get the thing going again. And so he was one of the people that appointed Michael Colgan to as artistic director. But I think there was a little falling out there. So whenever I came in after Titus Andronicus. I know it was probably 2006 or so. I got my first gig in there. But Michael never mentioned my dad at all. So.
Yes, well, and can we talk about Titus and Selena? Because I mean, Titus was a phenomenal piece of work, and again, there was a sea change happening around that as well. An awful lot of things were kind of coming together around that production. And was that, like, you know, working on classic texts? Is that something you like?
Well, I like Shakespeare because Shakespeare is so dramatic, I guess. You know, there is a huge amount of, like, it's, you know, if you wrote it now, it'd be thrown out. But, you know, what's in there is so dramatic. It actually does give a license to what I do, you know. And then I think particularly with, obviously, Selena has a very visual eye, and visuals get backed up really well with music and sound. So there was a kind of a natural vibration there that could work. And also that, like, so we I mean, we'd done a few shows before that, did a piece with Ella Clark, a dance piece, and we did Fando and Liss, and piece with Kate Ellis on cello, and Ronan Leahy and Alban Foray. So then we did Titus, and that was the big one. That was, she'd gotten a big grant from the Arts Council, and we had Jean-Guy Lecow, who was this designer from France. He'd worked with Peter Brook, and, you know, Monica Frawley was on that as well. And then we had lots of, like, Ruth Nega was in it, and Sarah Green, and lots of Alwyn and Owen and Aidan and all those. So it was a great cast and a great team, you know.
Yeah, and then again with Feston in the gate later on, like, I think again, but it's interesting those pieces of work, because you've done a few of those that had previous lives, say, in different media, or were kind of extant in different media, like the Shawshank and Feston. And is that kind of, do you have to kind of just blank yourself off from what's gone before?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I watched. There had just been a stage production actually of Feston a couple of years beforehand, which I hadn't seen anyway. But I think, like, if you don't have your own ideas about something, then what's the point? You know, you just have to, you know. And then Shawshank, remember, because it transferred to London, and the score I had was kind of like banjo, guitar, strings. And one of the producer's assistants over there saying, "Oh, that's just the score from the film." And I was going, "The score from the film is a big orchestral thing. There's nothing like it, you know." But the score from the film is amazing. So,
and again, looking back, you know, you've been involved in work that, you know, has been part of both yourself and the creators' kind of massive jumps in their career. Like, I mean, you mentioned Titus and Andronicus there, but also there was moments around, like, the Resistible Rise back in the Abbey with Jimmy, and that was a kind of, that was a production where an awful lot of forces kind of came to play. It was an incredible piece of work, and that must, again, the palette on that must have been fun.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a gangster tale as well, you know, with all these political overtones, and I'm quite a political junkie, so like, it just really, like, that was probably one of my favorite shows to work on. And also there was space. Jimmy was giving space to the music, you know. So, and again, it was a lot to do with the visuals. There was, you know, just the set pieces, the flag coming down. There was a lot of whiteface going on. So those kind of elements really give me a license to let loose. So, you know,
it's that kind of energy thing. The more than the artistic energy, and you mentioned politics and the kind of social politics, there's been energies around, you know, quite a lot of the work that you've been involved in for kind of different reasons. And then kind of, so some of the kind of, you know, the smaller work, and I mean that in a not, I don't mean scale, I mean scale rather than in importance, that, you know, you've worked with, again, around artists that were kind of really pushing themselves into, like, I mean, like Genevieve's work around ponding and stuff like that. I mean, again, is that a similar relationship with that work? How did that relationship occur?
We had just done, I can't remember the name of the show now, Ron Phelan directed it, and Peter Dunn had written it, and I can't remember the name of the show, but it was something in the Fringe we had done, and Genevieve was in that. So we just, we took that then to the next level, and I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night and go, ah.
I have Inhabitants, is it?
Inhabitants, thank you. Yeah. Very good.
But I think, I think again, I think that, I suppose what I'm driving at is there's kind of, you really seem to develop great relationships with our artists in different, whether it's a director or whether it's an actor developing their own work. And I think that stands to the power of what you've, you know, I mean, like you've worked with Leigh Murphy, you've worked with Rosalie McDonough, you know, there's kind of work there that's, and Noel Brown on Foxy, you know, that sort of,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna. I'm apologizing now for the one of the 200 that I don't get to mention, but I think I just wouldn't mind having a chat to you about Beckett and about what and about the sense of, because that shows kind of, you know, we're still going, but the creation of that and the use of sound and music with Beckett's words, was that a difficult process, or was that, you know?
Well, I mean, that's really Barry's thing, you know what I mean? That was it was about, it's probably is about 10 years since we did it, but we recorded a choir. My cousin is a choral director, so we recorded a choir singing the text. So Barry had written the music, I think, and then I think I just did the notation and the arrangements on those. So now whatever production that is going now is a new production. So I don't know if he's kept in any of that stuff or if there's new elements in there. Yeah. But at the time, it was like, because Beckett is very precise about the estate and what you can do. Because the very first thing I did in the Gate actually was, again, with Selena, but it was something with Onro and Alwyn, and I can't remember the name of that now either. But it was a Beckett piece, and so we wanted to put in bits and pieces, but the Gate were saying we're not allowed, it's in our contract that we can't. So we actually ended up having to sneak it in. So I don't know if this is going to be we're going to be sued now, but
allegedly it didn't happen.
Allegedly, yeah.
As a political junkie, I mean, it must have been interesting to work on the alternative recently in the last couple of years. That must have been an interesting thing. And again, to work on that kind of scale with that kind of, you know, not postmodernist, but that sense of you know, different world scoping. I mean, yourself and Jim must have a real shorthand at the moment, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's you know, we have good crack, and especially with Pat, the three of us together, it's always good crack, you know. But the alternative was like, so the guy obviously was part of the Play for Ireland scheme. So the guys, I think, had basically did about 20 or 30 drafts. So the core idea was always there, but it was developing. And I remember, like, I was at a couple of early read-throughs as well, and there was still lots of stuff in there that ended up being taken out. But it was kind of a lot like the silent system of writing, as in for the guys that he was developing. You do a read-through with some of the actors. They go back, do another draft. They do another read. So that kind of development seems to be really, like, it's a key part of the Fishamble work anyway, you know. So then when I came in properly, it was probably really when the production was starting. But Oisin had done, one of the writers, Oisin Kearney, had done, was doing all the video work as well. So a lot of what I was doing was going to be synced up to the video. So I had to wait for him to finish the edits.
Okay.
So then, like, there's the new stings, which I was composing for that. And then there was, like, the history of Ireland. It was like, diddly-eye, diddly-eye kind of stuff, you know, the British perspective, the history of Ireland, and various things. But it was really good fun. Do you know what I mean? It was like, even though there was a kind of potentially serious undertone to it, it was actually it was a lot of fun to do. So, I mean, it is a comedy. It's like a serious comedy, I guess, you know?
Yeah. And then you mentioned fun and kind of seriousness, and I think the sense of, and that kind of evocative or maybe contemporary space, I think you're working with kind of Corn Exchange as well. there's a lot of space. Yes, I imagine there's a lot of space within that work as well because of the visual and style. I mean, like Man of Valor in particular. I mean, that that's just listening to, because you've kind of obviously got on your website you've got pieces or sections from, but like the Man of Valor stuff, even to listen to a separate, it kind of just brings back the show. Was that a joy to work on?
Yeah, I mean that was class. It was like obviously, so I've done, Paul had been doing workshops with Corn Exchange, and he kind of invented this character who was a kind of Walter Mitty kind of character. So, but he was doing all his own sound effects. So he's like, and so we basically, when we got the show together, he himself and Michael developed a script and a storyline. That's what we ended up using. But there was no text. I mean, there was like words, but there was no actual text. So this was a great example of an Irish writer writing a play without text, which I think lots of people need to start doing. But anyway, so that was that. The guys were developing that, and I'd come into rehearsals and I'd take little clips of what Paul was doing, like this is going to be this action for getting across the river or whatever it might be. I'd go home, I'd put it into my computer, I'd score it like a film, and then I'd bring it back into Paul, and I'd say, so at this point, this is where you reach your hand up, and this point, so he'd learn his moves again, because he'd created them like the day or two beforehand. I'd written, and then he'd put everything, and then obviously I'd edit if he wanted to get something a little shorter, a little longer, whatever. So it became like a movie score, really, and it was like Annie had said to me, just go mad. That was her first, her overall direction before getting into nitty gritty, but it was like, do what you want kind of thing,
I mean, that must have been, I mean, I suppose in a way nerve-wracking, because the sense of, whereas there's a freedom there, but there's also incredible timing. I mean, obviously it's down to the operator as well, but there is a sense of, that's a lot of precision in that.
Yeah, but I mean, that's Paul being precise, and he would learn the score. And then he was on his radio mic, so he was doing all the sound effects. So I actually didn't do any sound in it. It was all just a score, So that was like that was just really good fun to work on,
I have to ask you, I won't keep you much longer, but I have to ask you about the madness of 24-hour plays, because that's, I remember directing one 2 or 3 years back and coming into you with your take and just kind of going, all right, okay, you're grand, away you go. But that must be, I mean, it's great crack, I'd imagine, but also totally mad.
Yeah, it's insane, but it's an adrenaline rush, I think, more than anything else. So, there's 6 shows, is it 6 or 7 shows for each, and everyone gets 15-minute tech. So they're like, there's a director behind you saying things, you're going, sure. But, you'll broadly, it's the script and all that kind of stuff. But like, if there's something really important, you won't do it during the tech. There's like an hour I get from like, Quiva O'Regan gives me, she's the stage manager, and she gives me an hour to fix everything, all the notes that the directors have given me that I didn't do during the 15-minute tech. But it is insane, but it's such an adrenaline rush that I'm kind of addicted to it, And that, actually, one of the shows, I don't know if it was the year I did it with you, but I'd just been broken into, and someone had stolen my phone and my and a computer, and they'd been trying to rob my car, but actually that's my car alarm went off, and I was like, hey, what are you doing? And he legged it, but but I was like, I'm going in to do this show. I don't care.
Wow, that has set you up in the mood for going into a 24-hour play tech, all right.
I mean, it was probably the best thing to do, just take my mind off it,
It's fascinating. It's funny, actually, having done one with you, that makes sense, because I was actually, I was asked to come back last year as an actor, and I remember being on the stage going, okay, nothing is here that's kind of meant to be here at all during the tech. And then suddenly it arrives. So it's a big level of kind of trust. You kind of go, yes, let's say it's going to be there. Or if it's not going to be there, Asher, it'll.
Yeah. But actually, in terms of the acting as well, it is because, like, often you'll go around, obviously, they do the staggers, like, at 10 in the morning. And you're looking at people and you're like, yeah, that's not really working. Yeah, well, that last play was good. But this one will, then that evening, when people come on stage, like, the actors just come alive. And it's just like sheer terror, panic, an audience, whatever it is. But, like, an actor should not be underestimated. They can really bring something, like, it's incredible what they're doing,
Sprinkling of panic magic dust, yeah.
Magic dust is everything.
And Before I let you go, just in relation to like your work with shows around the less composition, but around the more kind of sound design. And I'm thinking of working, like I'm thinking that even something like The Wickedness of Oz, which kind of has obviously an awful lot of show tunes in it. And I'm fascinated by the relationship of that to the design, to the and what comes first, chicken or egg? You know what I mean, in relation to do you have a way of kind of working that through yourself in relation to how you build up a sound design to work that has a very already songs existent in it?
Well, I mean that was down to Kate and Claire really. I mean the script was written. Every bit of music that was in there is part of the story line that's running through about her brother and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So because they just sent me the original song. So I mean that was really an arranging job, I think, more than anything else. I don't think like I wouldn't have done a huge amount again of sound design in that. That would have been more about like arranging the music.
Yeah.
So like so that she could sing on top of it to take away the vocals. So everything I did for that would have been like samples from my music libraries and stuff like that. Like I'll play on the keyboard, and then Kate can do her thing on top of it, But that was the sound design for that was Kate and Claire,
Yeah, but I think that's interesting because even from me, from someone who's kind of has some experience in that, the language is difficult around it, because you end up kind of merging. You say in some shows you have to do it all, and it's kind of hard to then kind of go, what's that and what's this and what's the other. We all know what composition is, and just one show I do want to ask you about, because I think there is, I think there is. It was a fabulous piece of work, and what drove it was brilliant. Was Mainstream a few years back with Rosaline.
Yeah.
Again, a very particular context, and I'm just interested in your process around your involvement around that. When did that happen? How did that work for you?
I mean, I think really in terms of the putting stuff together, that was during rehearsals. And there was also, like, Rosaline had a lot of stuff mentioned in the script as well. So there was pre-existing tracks and all that kind of thing. So there was a design element to that there was a bit of composition, but there was also a lot of the songs that were in there as well.
Yeah.
And there was a few recordings as well. There had to be the sound of a bit of lovemaking and stuff. So we were getting the actors to kiss their arms, It's great hilarity again,
I could just before I let you go, the weirdest thing that, like, I'm always amazed with kind of sounds that one has to find, is there something like, and are you like a lot of people into kind of archiving and sound designs and mapping and loops and stuff? One can get very geeky about it and trying to find the exact right thing. Like, what sort of deep diving have you done, Dennis, in relation to finding particular sounds?
I will try. I mean, I use this. There's a library called Sound Dog, so there's a lot of stuff on there. But like, if I can, I'll go out and I'll record my own sounds. I did, like, there's things like there's directions you get about, like, it needs to be more purple, or that kind of thing, which is like, okay, I'm just gonna make up whatever I want. But like, so for example, recently I did Francis Footwork with Kush Came, and there's a section where the neck crackers, they're bodyguards for this king, and they just keep cracking their necks. So I just got lots of celery, and I was like, I tried different vegetables, but the celery was the best. It gave it the most vicious sound. But there's actually some great stuff about Foley artistry, again, on YouTube and online. And the most amazing things, like the door in Star Trek is a sheet of paper coming out of an envelope. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And then all the stuff for Star Wars and the lightsabers, it's like someone throwing something onto an electric line. So there's incredible inventiveness. A donkey and a walrus for Chewbacca. There's like amazing. But people should check out Foley artistry on YouTube.
And then you've decided to release your music, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fantastic. I really think it's kind of, when I saw that, I went, yes. But I think there's I mean, it's a huge thing, obviously, in film, that the soundtracks are kind of released, and and not necessarily, some of the most famous ones aren't songs. They're kind of they're the score. Was it a big step for you, or was that kind of?
I mean, it's like, it didn't take a lot of work. I mean, it was just something I kind of was going, well, I have a bit of time. I have this body of work. Again, from the Screen Composers Guild, they had said that it's good to have music on Spotify just because music editors will go there and they'll use something as temp music and maybe a director might like it. So I was just thinking, well, I have all the stuff that, like, anything I put on it is something I like. I mean, there's lots of other stuff I would have. I mean, it was up at 180 tracks or something at one point, and it's like, no. So it's still too long, but it's a little bit of an indulgence, but it's there.
It's a great gift to us all. Yeah. I hope everyone goes out and gets it. But I think as well, just before I let you head off, that sense of that choosing must have been an amazing kind of, I suppose, memory trip for you to kind of bring you right back to an awful lot of the work.
Yeah, but I mean, I do also have a vanity wall in my bedroom of just like flyers from most of the shows, probably maybe 120 flyers up the wall, probably on top of each other now at this point. So if I'm ever in there, kind of, it's around the corner, so I don't see it all the time. But if I go, oh, I remember, and I kind of, you remember everyone that worked on it and what happened, the scandal that happened, or the crack that happened, or the tragedy that happened, or whatever it is,
Yeah. Well, listen, thanks very, very much for both joining me on this and for your extraordinary work. And I think, what's amazing listening to it outside, it's kind of original context, the beauty and the composition still stand up. You're an incredible artist, Denis, and it's great to get a chance to talk to you.
And you're very kind. Thanks.
I'll talk to you soon.